All right. So I am on location, guys. I'm at the RP Funding Center, so it's quiet right now. There, all of the participants, vendors, and everybody else is in our breakout room. So hopefully you guys can hear me okay, but please let me know, either come off of mute or drop something in the chat pod and let me know if for some reason you guys can't hear me. But good morning. And welcome to the Employability Skills Series, where we explore the top skills employers are looking for in candidates. Each week, we will cover a different topic with thoughts and insights from professionals in a variety of industries. I am your host, Megan Morrow, Senior Associate Director of Experiential Learning and Employer Relations. Today, I have Ryan Buckley, Director of Development, as my guest, and we will be discussing the importance of asking for and receiving feedback in the workplace. Ryan is originally from Long Island, New York, and attended Florida Southern College from 2011 to 2015, and again for his MBA graduating in December of 2016. Ryan got a start with the Tampa Bay Lightning organization in their client services department. He then worked back in Polk County for Visit Central Florida, followed by his tenure with the Lakeland Magic, the G League affiliate of the Orlando Magic, In his first season with the team, Ryan worked in an account executive role in the corporate partnership department, finishing fifth in the G League in the sponsorship revenue. He worked his way up to vice president of the team, responsible for all revenue generating roles within the organization. Most recently, Ryan was the director of member experience for the Orlando City and Orlando Pride soccer clubs. Ryan managed a team of 6 to 8 individuals who oversaw all of the season ticket members for both clubs. Ryan returns to his alma mater as a director of development for the Barney Barnett School of Business and Free Enterprise. He is also on the boards of the Central Florida Speech and Hearing Center and the Florida Festival and Events Association. Some other fun facts. He has managed 8 individuals with the Lakeland Magic organization and managed the team through COVID. He oversaw a 12-person department in Orlando City Pride with 6 to 8 direct reports. Ryan can dive into feedback, performance review structures, the importance of establishing transparency during one-to-one, as well as work-life balance implications and feedback. All right, so good morning, Ryan. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Happy to do it, Megan. Thanks for asking.
Thank you so much. And like I was telling our students, I am on location. I am at the RP Funding Center representing Florida Southern College at this really crazy event. It is the Level Up Resource Partner event. So it's really kind of exciting that I get to be here. So kind of part of what I do, but everybody's in a breakout room. So hopefully everybody can hear me just fine, which is really kind of cool and exciting. But so enough about that. So Ryan, tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll dive into this really cool topic about asking for and receiving feedback.
You found it? Yeah, no, thanks. Happy to be here with everybody. Thank you for the nice introduction, Megan. So you covered most of it. I've had a lot of extensive background in sports. So working with the Lakeland Magic was really unique. We started at RP Funding Center where you're at. So help build out a lot of the different sponsorship assets that you see over there. So like that Mountain Dew green space that's in the arena. Yeah, I was fortunate to work on with Pepsi and brand that space at the time. Really enjoyed the time there. It was very ground level up. And, as I worked my way up, within the ranks of that organization and even over at Orlando City, both cultures, they're amazing places to work, as is, the Lightning, obviously another great place to work, but really pride themselves on 360 feedback, right? Like, how are you giving feedback both from a manager to a reporting team member, but then also how is that going up the ladder, back up to your bosses and to C-level, and then how does that work cross-departmentally, right? As you have, when you work with a marketing department or a business intelligence department, how are you giving feedback on the department and the individuals that are running those specific operations? So, quite extensive in that space. And then on a personal side, I live not too far away from campus. I went here 2015 and 2016. So I have a good connection with the college. I teach a class in sport management. So I teach ethics in sports here. And then I have 2 little guys at home. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I have 2 dogs and a cat. So the house is like a zoo most of the time. But
That's awesome.
Love it. Love being close to home. So happy to be at the college.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah. I didn't know you were teaching. That's awesome. So kids get a lot of exposure to you then, students. I don't mean that by any disrespect, guys, but I do tend to say kids just because you could literally be my kids. All right, so let's talk about giving and receiving feedback. So when we say feedback, what are we talking about here, Ryan, and why is this important?
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction to start with, right? Because probably one of the most difficult things to do is separate the personal and the professional. I think it's often tricky, right? Because at a sports organization in particular, you pour in a lot of hours. And so it becomes you blends, right? Like what you do on a project really should be a reflection of your professional personality, I'll call it, but intrinsically, you personally put a lot of pride and effort into it, right? And it's a reflection of who you are. And so I think that's sometimes the toughest starting point is feedback is, fully based off you as a professional, right? It's what are the key elements and key objectives of your role and how are you meeting that criteria and your key benchmarks, right? So I worked in sales. Feedback in sales is very typically very specific based off of a key set of goals that you understand going into the role. And so a lot of feedback to me really generates from there, right? What are things that we've kind of laid out as clear expectations for you and how are you meeting those objectives? The other part of the feedback aside from metric based, right, is just cultural based. Like what are the things that are impacting you on a day to day? What's impacting your team, and then as we talk about as you give feedback to your boss, like what's impacting you to not be as successful or put you in a position to grow within the organization. So I think for the purpose of what we'll discuss today, those would probably be that's the framework I would use, and I would dive into metric based and cultural based feedback.
Okay, those are really good distinctions. I'd like to also point out too for our students that are on the call that feedback is positive. There might be some things
Yeah.
that you are lacking in, so it might be constructive feedback, but I think that we need to go into this discussion with a very positive and open mind that feedback is a good thing. Because we're only going to grow in the uncomfortable because no one ever wants to be told that they're doing something wrong or like, hey, you could be doing something better. But if you can lean into that level of discomfort, like, okay, that's not necessarily what I want to hear, but it is only meant for positivity and for growth. So to accept the fact that feedback is a part of, first of all, life in general, in your professional and personal life, and that we're going to grow out of that. So let's talk a little bit about those two distinctions you made. Like you said, the metric,
Yeah.
and then what was the other one? How did you separate those?
I always say, metric based, cultural based.
Okay. So let's talk about the metric based.
So metric based, right, is what are the elements that we've discussed that are pertinent to your role? So and it doesn't have to be sales specific, right? It could be marketing, it could be accounting, HR, but what are those kind of KPIs that are organizational? And then how does that impact your department? And then how does that impact your role? So I always think that's a good starting place. So, before you dive into specific feedback, right? Like for a salesperson, hey, organizationally, our goal is to be world class and to be the pride in our city was Orlando City, right? And so to do that, we need the stadium to be packed. Well, your department plays a role in that because you're a sales department, right? So you're going to really help us fulfill that mission. You specifically do that because you're focused on this area of selling. And here are the KPIs to get there. So I think the starting point is like you're a part of the bigger mission, right? So any of the feedback that I'm going to give you is going to be pertinent to those three layers because they each are going to impact one another. So when I talk metric based, we're going to start at that bottom layer and then it's going to work its way back up, right? So for your role, you need to hit XYZ revenue number. And here are the ways you're going to get there. Here's what we've curated for you to help you get there. I think what's important is to me, when you give feedback, data and numbers help drive decisions, right? So anytime you can use something off of a scale, it's just helpful because you can determine which way to pivot. Sometimes when you give feedback off a feeling, and I'll give you a great example, with someone in sales, a lot of feedback that you tend to give tends to be, and I'm talking from manager to employee, right? But I can go either way. But a lot of the feedback you tend to give tends to be off of how they did on a phone call. What does an email outreach look like? Some of that's very like, I don't want to say it's general, but it's tough to to back a lot of that up. So if I say, hey, you know, I think it's taking too long for you to overcome this objection or get to the ask, that's just how I feel, right? Like you may feel totally different. So that to me causes a lot of friction. It's difficult sometimes to get over that hump. I would bucket that more into like a cultural thing, right? Where I could say, hey, you know, you're around a lot of your peers, and I see you as a leader within our department. One thing I'd like for you to work on to see to be viewed that way is to, when you're on a phone call, get to your ask a little bit quicker. So let's do some training based off of that, and you continue the conversation. So that's kind of the key difference between the two, right? Metric, I have a subset of figures that we've talked about and how you're going to get there. Cultural is how are you impacting the people around you, right? So if I have feedback that's based off of a person to your right or to your left, and what you're doing that's impacting them positively or negatively, because not everything has to be negative, that is going to sit in that bucket. I hope that answered your question, but that would be how I would segment both of them.
Okay, yeah, no, that does. Yeah, I like that distinction between like the feeling and, you know, where you're seeing it from your point of view, but that metric, okay, that makes a lot of sense because I think it's really important too for us to understand like what's expected of us, right? Because then we know where we're operating from, and because I think it's like a roadmap, if you will. Like, so I know exactly what I'm supposed to do because I think as human beings, we operate really well with boundaries. We know what's expected of us because I think when we're in environments, and I know I can speak from personal experience working in an environment where the boundaries were very unclear, working for a supervisor that was very chaotic, that it changed day to day. Like I never knew, like today I had to write with the blue pen. Okay, so I write with the blue pen. Then tomorrow I get yelled at for writing with the blue pen. Why are you writing with the blue pen? You have to write with the black pen. And so never knowing what was expected of me was a very chaotic environment, you know, so I never knew like what was expected of me. And so it was very hard to work in that environment. And so the feedback was always just basically off the chain, you know. And so it was very hard to work in that kind of environment. So when you have like clear cut expectations, like a matrix, if you will, you know, like you were just talking about, knowing exactly what my KPIs are. Now, can you define KPIs? Because I'm pretty sure our students probably don't know what that means.
Sure. Yeah. So key performance indicators, right? So I'll get off of a sales example, but if you just were in, you know, a marketing, you know, a KPI, or, you know, like event planning, right? A KPI could be number of events that you've hosted, right? So it's a metric that I'm going against. It's very clear to see, and I have to clear that objective, right? I have to hit that metric. That would be a KPI. Now, the organization or your department has viewed that particular indicator as a key measure of success. So typically it's like, you know, 3, 4 that you would identify as KPIs within your department. And then there may be, you know, OKRs which are objectives and key results, which are based organizationally, right? So they're a little bit more grander. But you kind of, in my opinion, right, from a feedback side, you have to identify those because that's what you're all working toward. And I think the benefit, and I'll kind of switch here a little bit, you know, when you start to give feedback up to your manager, it actually gives you something to hold your manager accountable for, right? Like, hey, we've laid out that these are our KPIs, and I have an expectation to get there, but I think I'm missing X, Y, and Z resource to accomplish it, right? I think this project is taking up this amount of time and I'm not going to hit my metric. So a lot of times, feedback that an employee gives up, you want to avoid it being feeling. I feel like this is happening, and so it's causing it. As valid as that may be, right? It doesn't provide a measurable change. And for something to happen within an organization, I have to see that there is a measurable change that will happen, cause and effect, right? It's simple to put. So this is the cause of what's happening. The effect of if we change it is going to be this. And I know you didn't ask me this question, but I think that tends to be the struggle when you get to give feedback up. I don't think I'm being heard. I don't think my feedback's being taken. I actually think sometimes it's because it's not positioned correctly. And I think if you position it in a way where it's number-based, data-based, and I can clearly see, you know, from point 1 to point 2, this is the delta or percentage efficiency that's going to result from it, I am more likely to be a stakeholder in your corner and help make the change, right? And that's from personal experience too, that I've seen. Someone comes to me with a problem. I agree with you. That could be a problem, but I don't really know, one, if it is, and two, how to solve it. So I think that's, just the tough, as you probably try to segue into that topic. I just think that's a tough thing to do if you don't at the start identify what those KPIs are, for your department and for your role.
Okay, so two good things that you said just there. So identifying what the KPIs are, which again are the key performance indicators. So you know what is expected of you. So between you and your supervisor, you should have those lined out. And I think like as you develop in your role, you will eventually be part of that process of identifying what your own KPI should be. So I think as you're coming into your role, especially as a new graduate or maybe as an intern, your supervisor is probably going to identify those KPIs for you. But as you grow and develop and become more seasoned, you will be part of that process. And what I can see as in like leadership coaching, where you will start to come into your one-on-ones with your supervisor, like, you should start developing your own agenda, whereas instead of the supervisor creating the agenda, and this is part of that, as you're saying, like that giving feedback up, or part of that requesting feedback is kind of part of this, what this topic is. So I think those were a little bit interchangeable, like feedback up, requesting feedback is where you're saying, this is the where I think I should be hitting, but also coming with solutions to saying, this is part of the problem, because you don't want to always just come to your manager or supervisor with problems. You want to come with solutions or propose solutions, because I know when I've been in leadership roles and somebody's just coming with complaining, like, okay, here's my problem, dumping it on my lap. Like, okay, I've got all these other things I'm doing too. Like, okay, what do you want me to do about it? Because I'm not in your shoes. I don't know how you're seeing, your problem from your perspective. So you should come with some proposed solutions, which will gain a lot of respect from your supervisor's point of view, because, you're not just saying, fix it, this is hands off, this is not my problem. This is my problem because I'm the one coming to my supervisor with the problem, but here's some proposed solutions. I think that shows ownership of your role. And like you said, that's coming with that. Oh, shoot, my train just jumped the track because it was, but yeah, with part of the agenda with the KPIs, and now I've just lost my whole train of thought, but it was a good thing that it was two of the things I wanted to touch on, but knowing what your roles and your objectives are, and then kind of coming into that when you're meeting with your supervisor. And then also I wanted to touch on ROI. So what does ROI mean?
Yeah. So your return on investment, right? So, and you can kind of frame that in a couple of different ways depending on the conversation, but I'll give you a really good example actually from my last role. I had a employee who pretty early on, I could tell I thought had a good gauge, of the department, of kind of both from a cultural side, right, from like morale side, but also just from a workplace efficiency side. And sometimes like at a manager level, like, you're moving very fast across multiple employees, and I wasn't in the weeds on some of the different areas, right? And I think to have somebody who took initiative to say, look, yeah, I just don't think we're giving this area of the business enough attention. I would like to do X, Y, and Z, to see if that'll help create more efficiency for us. What are your thoughts? And having that dialogue, yeah, I can tell pretty early on, this is somebody that could take on a little bit more responsibility. And to bring this back to ROI, one of the things they identified was it was really difficult to meet some of our accounts, during the year, particularly ones that we thought weren't going to continue paying. And so he had an idea to do these match day meet and greets. So we would position members of the team across the stadium and do like raffles, right? So if you come and you meet your member experience specialist and you scan a QR code, you get entered to win like a signed ball or a signed jersey. Now he presented it and then said, I would actually like to take on X, Y, this initiative of the project. Like, what are your thoughts on that? And he started it with feedback that we're not in a position enough to meet these people, and it's impacting our bonus, right? And it's impacting this particular metric we're evaluated on. So kind of like I laid out in the framework, like he takes an objective that we talked about. He says an area that's a struggle as to why he thinks not only him, but the team may not hit that objective. and then presents an idea, whether it gets approved or not, of I think this could be something that from an efficiency side could help. I loved it. I thought it was a great idea. But in the bigger picture, and this is more of a personal ROI, in the bigger picture, I saw him as somebody that could take a step up, right? Because now in my head, I'm like, he cares about the organization. He understands our objectives and how we have to get there. And he's comfortable with understanding how to put people in positions to be successful. So it actually primed him to take on a leadership. He's actually a manager now, but at the time he got promoted to a senior level. And I think it was conversations like that help justify the case to get you growth. So from organizational ROI, it's massive, right? So anything that you can do that's going to drive more efficiency through cost save, or it's going to create different avenues of revenue, that's massive, right? It's always a priority. But also, the intrinsically, like the more you can do that stuff, the more people view it as that's an individual that could take on a task or a project, and cares. And I want that person to be primed for the next opportunity to take a step up. So I also think that's the benefit of that feedback going up. It's okay, this person knows what they're doing and they understand what they have to do. They're actually ready to take on a little bit more work to help us get to where we want to go as an organization.
I think that's really crucial. And students that are on the call, that's the value that you're bringing to the organization. When we talk about that in class, when we talk about what's the value that you bring, when you're seen as that ROI, which means return on investment, when you are bringing return to the company, whether it's monetary or whether it's customer retention, but when you're increasing the bottom line, whatever the company is, stands for, that's that ROI. And when you bring in that kind of value, that's the stuff that you can highlight on your resume, your work experience, that's the stuff that you're going to be able to, your workplace accomplishments. So when you're having those one-to-one meetings with your supervisor, when you're having those evaluations, whether they're annually, semi-annually, well, whatever that looks like in your roles, that's the stuff that you need to be bringing to the table to talk about. Don't wait for your supervisor to bring it to you. That's part of this call. Be comfortable with asking for feedback, receiving that feedback, but also, you have to be able to say, hey, this is what I'm doing for you, taking that initiative, which is another thing that companies, employers say that they're looking for. They want employees that are willing to take that initiative, say, hey, this is what I'm doing for you. This is what I need you to do for me, which is what you just said a little bit earlier, Brian, is that, a way to hold your supervisor accountable is saying, here's what you're asking of me. Here are the goals. Here's my KPIs that you're asking of me, but here's what I'm lacking. I think this is the part I was trying to get to that I think I was losing my train of thought. Here are the goals that I needed to hit, but here's the resources I'm lacking. So, you're bringing that to those meetings as well. And then you're saying, okay, now here's what I've done for you. Now, what else can I do? Like, give me more, taking on initiative because I want to do more for this company, positions you in ways to get promoted or to be recognized, moving up into different levels. So the more that you're comfortable with, asking for and receiving feedback, the more you're going to grow, the more you're going to be recognized, the more you're going to move up. If that's your goals is to move up in a company, if that's what you're going for. Excellent.
So
Ryan,
I'd add to that, sorry, real quick, I'd add to that too, to help like the structure of the way that I ran these feedback with my team. So I had formal one-on-ones with each member once a week, and then they could always schedule an informal one-on-one if there was something really pressing. But it would be, how are you doing personally? And I always started there because if there was something that was happening on a personal side, I did not want to then take the rest of the meeting to talk professionally because it wouldn't matter what I say, right? Like it's irrelevant. You're distracted by something happening in your personal life. So I always recommend that as a place to start. Then it would move into what are the top 3 projects, that you're working on.
okay.
And let's kind of have a dialogue on that. And then the last 2 elements were, what is something I could be doing better? Like, what are you not seeing from me or leadership that we should be providing you? And then it would end with, here are things that I've noticed that I think you could be doing better, or that I just need to applaud you on because you're doing a great job at it. So hopefully that helps in terms of the framework that I'm talking from. But those are kind of the 4 key elements of a one-on-one meeting on our end.
I like that. And actually, I do that in my own parenting. I check in with my children. I say, what do you like that I'm doing? What do you don't like that I'm doing? What could I do more of? What could I do less of? Because even as a parent, I'm not perfect, so I'm the leader of my family. And so I need to check in my own self because I need to say, okay, what am I doing better? Or what am I doing good? What am I not doing good? What do I do more of? What do I do less of? Okay, we're kind of coming up on time, and I want to be respectful of that, of yours and of our students. So this idea of asking for and receiving feedback, this is, it's uncomfortable, I think, for some
Sure.
people, especially, I know for me, I'm going to be the first to admit sometimes I have an ego of saying, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. So how do we set that ego aside? How do we, how do we develop this skill? To say, okay, ego aside, how do we learn to accept feedback, especially if it's something that we don't want to hear?
Yeah. So one, frame it correctly. So I wanted to come to you, Megan, because I really enjoy what I'm doing and I want to continue to grow within the organization. And I want to get a better understanding of what can I do today as I look to take these next steps to get to that level or that area, right? So there's always that's an easy one to discuss because you're going to get organic feedback pertinent to that role. The second way you can do it is frame it as an efficiency within the organization. So, for me, I working in this sphere, I wanted to kind of bring to light, a project or a task that's fallen on our department or in my role. I just wanted to give you some feedback in terms of what that project looks like, the demands of the project, how it's impacting me both personally and professionally, and then some opportunities for improvement moving forward. So that's always kind of a second one, right? That you can kind of layer in is it's a project or task, and I want to talk about it. The third one is you just kind of be very straight and say, look, I've been in the role for X amount of time, and I wanted to share with you just some feedback on my experience in the role and some areas that have gone really well. But I also wanted to hear from you just what could I be doing in the role to maximize my time, both personally and professionally. I want to grow as a professional. I want to grow as a person. So you have a keen eye over what I'm doing. I'd love to hear some of your insights in terms of what that looks like. And I think if you frame it in either one of those three scenarios, there's other ways you can do it. But I think either one of those three scenarios, it just helps because the feedback's going to be more pertinent to your role and to the work. Inevitably, you will find a way that it's going to impact you personally, and you just have to put a shutter on that. I used to tell, when salespeople would ask me, or in my case, account managers, hey, like, why am I not beating this objection? It's like, well, part of the reason is you're not making an ask. You're just asking too many questions. You have to get to an actual sale portion. Here's what you can do. Like, some people take that extremely personal, right? You're saying I talk too much. Oh, I'm not saying you talk too much. I'm saying the structure of your dialogue just maybe needs to tweak a little bit. And so I think that's why I go back to use data and use numbers, is because it takes the personal out of it. But you have to be open to somebody giving you feedback professionally that you may inherently take as personally. And as long as you set the parameters that this is related to my role and how I'm going to maximize my time in the role, you have to put a shutter between Ryan the person and Ryan the professional, and just live in the Ryan the professional sphere. And then when you leave that office, you could be Ryan the person again. But it's everything in that office during that time is just based off of the professional side of your role. That would be the biggest advice I would give. You're going to ask for feedback, be open to it. And don't confuse and conflate personal who you are with the professional what you're doing, because that's very easy to do. And if you set the framework and the guides for what the conversation is going to be, and it's based off of your professional work, then leave it at that. But I think you'll get great feedback, from your employer in that regard.
I think that's excellent, excellent advice. Yeah. And that takes skill in itself, just to be able to separate personal and professional, because you are the same person, but and it may feel personal, but your supervisor is not your friend. They're at work. I mean, you might be friendly, and you might even be friends outside of work, but when you're at work, that's your boss. That's not your bestie or so definitely separate that personal and professional. I think that's excellent advice. Ryan, thank you so much for your time and your insight onto this topic. This is really important. Students, I hope that you learned something really great. Ryan is on our campus, so feel free to reach out to him, connect with him on LinkedIn. He is also in our building. So if you see him, say hi to him, let him know that he was on this call with you today. Again, Ryan, thank you. Students, thank you for your time. And if you did not track your attendance yet, please make sure you scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the chat pod. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Ryan, I'll see you around. Bye,
Awesome. Thank you,
everybody.
Megan. Thank y'all.
Bye.